Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor, and you hear from us here on this program and pretty much from a lot of television shows on Salem News Channel. Concerns over these Soros-backed rogue prosecutors who get elected in Democrat-dominated cities. Usually they just have to win the Democrat primary and then they're set. And then they basically ignore a lot of the laws, the standards, the legislation, the sentencing guidelines that the state legislature puts down, all for the sake of social justice, criminal justice reform. It's a problem, and we talk about it quite a bit, and our next guest has actually literally written the book about it. The book is called Rogue Prosecutors: How Radical Soros Lawyers Are Destroying America's Communities. And the author, along with his co-author Zach Smith, is Cully Stimson from Heritage Foundation. Cully, thank you for joining us. Thank you for writing this book. I've been reading your articles for the last 5-6 years, so I know you've been walking down the path of writing a book.
We have, and it was a labor of love or hate because, I mean, it really was a topic that needed to be explored in depth. And so our blog posts and our legal memoranda and our symposia were fine, but we really wanted to dig deep, Larry, into the origins, playbook, and beliefs of this movement, and then dig into the specific policies and the impact of these pro-criminal, anti-victim policies in 8 particular cities. And then we wanted to follow the money. So we have a whole chapter on the money. And
Great.
So it took 10 months to write it. It's a long book. It's heavily footnoted. And we're looking forward to its release.
So let's talk specifically about what this means. I love the fact that you call them prosecutors, because depending on what jurisdiction you're in, district attorney, Commonwealth attorney, state's attorney, their job is to prosecute criminals. That's the job, prosecute criminals. And when they get elected, these guys, generally speaking, they do the opposite. They don't get into the job to put people behind bars.
Right. And there are 2,300 elected DAs across the country, and the ingenious, devilish aspect of this movement, which is very well funded and started in 2016, as we chronicle in our book, is that they realize that it's the prosecutor who's the gatekeeper to the criminal justice system. It's not the mayor, it's not the city council, it's not the governor, not the sheriff, it's the DA, the prosecutor. And so these are low visibility, low dollar races for the most part, except in the big cities. And even there, they're low dollar politically wise. And so they decided to just flip this narrative and swap out a law and order DA, whether they're Democrat or Republican is irrelevant, with a pro-criminal, anti-victim zealot. And that's what they've done. And although we highlight 8 in 8 individual chapters, there's 70 plus across the country. And that represents over 60% of the population of this country. So it's a scourge across this country.
Yeah, and it's so contrary to how most Americans think our government runs. You know, you elect your representatives, they go to the state capitol, they debate and write legislation. If they vote on it and the governor signs it, then it becomes law. These guys basically go in there and, under the guise of prosecutorial discretion, they just ignore the law. So why go through the messy business of actually legislating when you can just ignore it and still get your goals?
Yeah, they're abusing their office. They engage in prosecutorial nullification. And we have good criminal justice systems across this country, 18,000 police departments, 2,300 elected DAs, 3,143 counties. But we have an adversarial criminal justice system, which is better than the rest around the world, and we pit a hard-charging, ethical, fair prosecutor against a hard-charging, ethical, fair, aggressive public defender or criminal defense attorney, and put him in front of a judge and let the jury sort it out. But they believe, this movement, that they believe the entire criminal justice system is racist. Obviously, it's not. And they believe that the only way to change that paradigm is to, quote, reverse engineer and dismantle, unquote, the criminal justice system as we know it. Those are their words, not ours. And so they are just swapping out law and order DAs for pro-criminal, anti-victim zealots. And the crime has exploded in those cities. And of course, it hurts the very people they pretend to care the most about, which are minorities.
You actually have George Soros's name in your subtitle, How Radical Soros Lawyers Are Destroying America's Communities. Is this really, do all roads really lead to George Soros on this? Was he sort of the origination of this strategy?
So we thought so when we were first writing about this, but what we found out in the research for our book is it was really an idea hatched between a Soros employee and an ACLU employee. Whitney Tymas and Chloe Cockburn. And they met at a Panera here in Washington, D.C. to try to unseat pro-death penalty elected DAs in the South. They knocked off 3 of them with Soros money, and then they decided to go big, and they went after Anita Alvarez, who was the Democrat female elected DA in Chicago. They primaried her with Kim Foxx, and then decided to go national. And so this was funded by Soros, and then Carrie Tuna, Dustin Moskovitz of Facebook, and some other tech billionaires. And again, these are low-dollar affairs. $1 million goes a long way in a DA's race.
Yeah, but the repercussions are enormous, and that's the other part of your book here. The jury's in now on this. There's no guesswork. Oh gosh, what will happen? We've seen it. What cities have been devastated the most by this new approach just in the last, what, 6-7 years?
Yeah, Los Angeles, obviously. Philadelphia has one of the most evil, despicable rogue prosecutors in Larry Krasner. Homicides almost doubled under his watch. Rapes, carjackings. It's a carjacking capital of the United States now. Chicago under Kim Foxx, the first rogue prosecutor. Kim Gardner in St. Louis was just resigned in disgrace. Rachel Rollins, the DA in Boston, who was the U.S. attorney for Massachusetts, who just resigned in disgrace under an ethical crowd and should have been prosecuted, by the way, by the DOJ. Marilyn Mosby up the street in Baltimore. And then Chesa Boudin, the son of the Weather Underground in San Francisco, who was recalled in disgrace by Democratic voters. And the sad part of this story, Larry, is it didn't need to happen. The criminal justice systems across the country have been reforming themselves for years and are the reason that crime has been going down dramatically across the country since its last spike in 1992. But when these guys come into office starting in 2016, crime in those cities explodes.
Well, and with each and every one of those prosecutors you just mentioned, and I would add Steve Descano here in Fairfax County in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and Buda Bibarai in Loudoun County, they just have to win the Democrat nomination. That's it. I hate to be cynical, but that's the case. So are enough Democrats stepping up? Do they see the problem? Are reasonable Democrats coming in challenging, and actually do they have a chance?
Big time. Big time. And in fact, we quote and interviewed mostly Democrats in the inner city for this book, including city council members. One in particular, Andrew Lara, is a Pico Rivera city council, which I know you know, Pico Rivera,
Southern California,
from the LA area. And he said that these rogue prosecutors are, quote, ruining our brand, unquote. Because, you know, law and order should not be a partisan issue. And so it's the Democrats who voted these people into office, and it's been the Democrats who beat them on recall elections or in primaries. And so, for example, in Fairfax County, which you mentioned, Steve Descano, the Soros bought and paid for rogue prosecutor, 72% of the money he got came directly from Soros PACs. So he's running in the primary against Ed Nuttall. Ed Nuttall is a good guy. He's a law and order guy. He's a Democrat, but he doesn't do party stuff. He does crime prevention. And it's an open primary, so Republicans can vote for Ed Nuttall. And I think people are just starting to see that these so-called reformers are actually nightmares in office, and so they got to get rid of them.
Well, the timing for this book couldn't be any better. It releases in a couple of weeks, but people can pre-order it now. It's affordable. You should get several of them to pass around, because this is a nonpartisan issue. It's about the safety in our communities, and we can fix it. We can fix it quickly. Thank you, Cully Stimson, for writing it. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.